Have you ever stopped to think about why, even when you get everything you want, you still feel empty? Why that purchase, that relationship, that success you so desperately desired brought satisfaction for just a few days? Over 150 years ago, a philosopher named Søren Kierkegaard discovered something disturbing about human nature. He realized that we are unique beings in the universe. We have limited bodies, but infinite dreams. And today, I'm going to show you how this contradiction is the root of all your suffering. Get ready, because after this video, you'll never look at your desires the same way again. Kierkegaard had a radical vision about what it means to be human. For him, we are creatures trapped in an impossible contradiction to resolve. Imagine a bird that dreams of flying to the stars, but is trapped in a cage. We are finite, our body ages, our time is limited, our energy has an end. But inside us, there exists something that wants the infinite. We want eternal love, endless success, absolute knowledge. This tension between what we are and what we want is like living with a wound that never heals. The Danish philosopher called this the synthesis of temporality and eternity. It's not something we choose, it's our fundamental structure. It's exactly this contradiction that makes desire become an inexhaustible source of anguish. Because no matter how much we chase after our dreams, we'll always run up against the limits of reality. And the more conscious we become of this limitation, the more desperately we try to transcend it through desires. But this anguish isn't just any feeling. It has a specific anatomy that Kierkegaard mapped with surgical precision. There's a crucial difference between fear and anguish that most people don't understand. When you have fear, you always know what you're afraid of. An angry dog, a difficult test, a bill to pay. Fear has an object, has direction, has a possible solution. Anguish is completely different. It's that strange sensation that wakes you up at dawn for no apparent reason. That tightness in your chest when you think about the future. That restlessness that seems to have no name or address. Kierkegaard called it the dizziness of freedom. It's like standing at the edge of a precipice. You're not afraid of falling, you're afraid of jumping. Anguish is born when we realize that we have infinite possibilities before us, but that we're forced to choose only one life to live. Each choice we make kills thousands of other possible lives. And that's where desire enters as the protagonist of this existential tragedy, promising to be the bridge between who we are and who we'd like to be. This constant anguish generates something even deeper and more destructive, existential despair. But attention, we're not talking about the natural sadness you feel when you lose someone dear or when things don't go as planned. Kierkegaard discovered something astoundingly modern. Most people live in chronic despair without even knowing it. It's like having a silent disease that corrodes from within while you maintain a facade of normalcy. He identified 3 distinct types of this despair. First, unconscious despair. These are those people who live on autopilot, always chasing the next pleasure, the next conquest, filling every second of the day with activities to avoid facing the internal void. These are the lives that look perfect on Instagram, but hide a total absence of purpose. Second, conscious but powerless despair. It's when you know something is fundamentally wrong in your life, but feel incapable of changing. It's the feeling of being trapped in an invisible prison, repeating the same destructive patterns day after day. And third, rebellious despair. When you actively fight against your own nature, trying to force yourself to be someone you're not. The tragic thing is that each type of despair feeds on desires in different ways, creating specific vicious cycles that are extremely difficult to break. And why does desire function like an engine that never finds a stopping point? The answer lies in the basic structure of how our mind processes satisfaction and lack. Think about the last object you really wanted: a phone, clothes, a car, a trip. Do you remember the anxiety before getting it? The growing expectation, the detailed plans, the dreams you created around that thing? Your mind transformed that object into a magical solution for problems that didn't always relate to it. And after you finally got it, how long did the real satisfaction last? Days? Weeks? Soon, you are already looking at the next version, the next model, the next experience. This happens because desire isn't about the object itself. It's about the state of anticipation, about the promise of completeness that never materializes. It's like a drug that's addictive, not for the pleasure it provides, but for the hope it awakens. Our mind evolved to be a radar for problems and opportunities, always focusing on what's missing for survival. This tool worked perfectly when we needed to hunt mammoths and escape from predators. But in a society of abundance, this same mental programming became our personal prison, creating artificial needs where there should only be gratitude and contentment. Kierkegaard was brilliant in perceiving how desire operates through the economy of lack, a perverse system where our happiness always depends on something we don't have. You only desire what's absent from your life. But here's the cruelest trick of human nature. The more things you get, the more things you realize you don't have. It's an impossible emotional mathematics, where each conquest multiplies the possibilities of lack. It's like climbing an infinite ladder. With each step you climb, you realize the ladder continues climbing forever. In an era where we have instant access to information about how people live all over the world, our list of lacks has become truly infinite. We see the influencer's house, the colleague's success, the apparently perfect life of social networks, and automatically our mind executes an automatic program, identifies the difference, classifies it as lack, generates desire to fill it. The result is that we live in an emotional economy based on perpetual scarcity, even when we objectively have historical abundance. It's like being a millionaire who feels miserable because he discovered that billionaires exist. And the more we try to fill these artificially created lacks, the more our mind becomes specialized in identifying new lacks. It's a mental algorithm that feeds back on itself and grows exponentially. Here we arrive at a distinction that can completely change how you understand satisfaction, the difference between immediate pleasure and lasting meaning. Imagine you spent the whole day eating only sweets. At first, it was a pleasurable experience, but after a few hours you felt nauseous, with a headache, empty inside. Immediate pleasure works exactly like this. It's intense in the moment, but leaves an emotional hangover. It's like burning furniture to stay warm. It solves the immediate problem, but destroys something more valuable in the process. Kierkegaard noticed that our entire culture is based on the lie that pleasure is synonymous with happiness. But this is a devastating categorical confusion. Pleasure is a temporary bodily sensation. Happiness is a lasting state of mind. Pleasure depends on external stimuli. Happiness springs from internal resources. When you build your entire life on the pursuit of pleasures, whether through food, sex, entertainment, shopping, you're literally building your house on sand. The first existential storm, a loss, a frustration, a health crisis, brings everything down. Because pleasure is about having, meaning is about being. Pleasure is about accumulating experiences. Meaning is about integrating experiences into a coherent life narrative. And this difference determines whether you'll live as an addict to stimuli or as a complete human being. Perhaps the most painful and self-destructive type of desire is the one that makes us want to be fundamentally another person. How many times have you thought, if I were more beautiful, if I were more intelligent, if I had been born into a rich family, if I had other talents? This is the desire for existential escape, the desperate will to escape from who you really are, from the life you really have, from the limits you really possess. Kierkegaard called this the sin against oneself, the refusal to accept and work with the raw material of your own existence. It's like a fish that spends its entire life frustrated trying to be a bird instead of discovering the depths of the ocean, or like a violinist who gives up music because he wanted to be a pianist. The ironic thing is that this type of desire creates a devastating, vicious cycle. The more you try to be another person, the further you get from discovering who you could really become. The more you reject your basic identity, the emptier and more disconnected you feel. The more you compare your real life with fantasies about other possible lives, the more inadequate your current life seems. It's a race without a finish line, a thirst that intensifies with each sip of salt water. And the worst part is that while you're obsessed with being another person, you're wasting the only life you can really live, yours. Now let's examine how our modern society created the most sophisticated and powerful desire production machine in human history: consumer capitalism. Think about this with the coldness of a scientist. There are literally thousands of people working full-time, using the most advanced discoveries in psychology and neuroscience to figure out how to make you desire things you didn't even know existed. Every commercial on TV, every illuminated storefront, every personalized ad on your phone is the result of billions of dollars invested in behavioral research. The goal is simple and perverse: to create an artificial sensation of need. Your life is incomplete without this. You deserve that. Successful people use this. And it works because it exploits a fundamental vulnerability of the human mind: our tendency to confuse wanting with needing. The system is so efficient that it manages to make us buy things we don't need, with money we don't have, to impress people we don't even know. Each purchase comes wrapped in the promise that this time will be different, that after this I'll be satisfied. But since desire is structurally insatiable, a new product always appears, an improved version, a need you didn't know you had. The result is that we live in a society where the engine of the economy is literally human unhappiness. If people were genuinely satisfied, the system would collapse. That's why there's an entire industry dedicated to ensuring you never feel completely fulfilled. It's a psychological parasite that feeds on your existential anguish. And if capitalism hijacked our material desires, social networks performed an even more insidious operation. They hijacked our deepest social and emotional desires. Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter. All these platforms operate with the same addictive logic as casinos. They release small, unpredictable doses of dopamine, some likes here, some comments there, an unexpected notification, to keep us in a compulsive checking routine. But underneath all this illusion of digital connection, there's a silent epidemic of loneliness and inadequacy. Why? Because we're constantly comparing our real life with all its mundane moments and difficulties, with the edited, filtered, and carefully curated version of other people's lives. We see only the best angles, the programmed smiles, the moments of success, the celebrated conquests. Our mind, which is already programmed to focus on what's missing, enters a spiral of inadequacy. Why does everyone seem happier than me? Why can't I be as interesting as that person? What's wrong with me that my life isn't like that? The result is an entire generation living in constant performance anxiety, always trying to create a version of themselves worthy of digital approval. Paradoxically, the more connected we become virtually, the more isolated we feel emotionally. Because we're always playing roles instead of simply existing, always consuming other people's lives instead of living our own. Modern culture also sold us one of the most destructive lies in history: the idea that external success is synonymous with internal fulfillment. From school to the corporate environment, from family to the media, everything conspires to convince us that we need to win at life, according to criteria established by other people. But what exactly does winning mean? Having more money than your parents, a higher position than your colleagues, a bigger house than the neighbors, enough followers to be considered influential? Kierkegaard would laugh bitterly at this logic, because he would recognize in it just another sophisticated version of the eternal race after objects of desire. Success, the way our society defines it, is just a carrot dangled in front of the donkey, always at enough distance to keep you running, but never close enough to really satisfy. You conquer a goal, feel superficial satisfaction for a few days or weeks, then automatically adjust your standards upward and need a bigger goal, a more ambitious objective. It's a reward system designed to never allow lasting contentment. And the price we pay for this pursuit is extremely high. We sacrifice genuine relationships for strategic networking, trade authentic experiences for career opportunities, lose touch with our real values in the name of measurable results. While we chase success defined by others, we're systematically ignoring the only thing that really matters: discovering what constitutes a meaningful life specifically for us. Another devastating aspect of modern desire culture is how it contaminates and destroys our most intimate relationships. The entertainment industry, Hollywood, Netflix, romantic literature, sold us a toxic fantasy about love. The idea that there's a soulmate in the world who will complete all our emotional lacks, solve all our existential anguishes, fill all the voids in our life. This is one of the cruelest deformations we can impose on both ourselves and the people we love. When you enter a relationship expecting the other person to function as a magical solution for your internal problems, you're condemning both you and her to a toxic and unsustainable dynamic. You start projecting all your unrealized desires onto the beloved person, transforming her into a repository of your impossible expectations. And when she inevitably fails to be perfect, because she's a complex and limited human being like you feel betrayed, deceived, as if you had bought a defective product. The problem isn't love itself, which is one of the noblest experiences of human life. The problem is transforming love into a commercial transaction, into a consumer relationship where you invest time, energy, and attention, expecting to receive happiness, security, and identity in return. Healthy relationships work exactly the opposite way. Two people who already have a solid foundation of self-knowledge and self-esteem choose to share their lives, not because they need each other to survive emotionally, but because they want to grow together and contribute to something greater than themselves. All this constant pressure from unsatisfied desires has created something our generation knows intimately, an anxiety epidemic that has no precedent in human history. It's no coincidence that we live in the most anxious, most medicated, and most psychologically unstable era of all times. When you live in a perpetual state of wanting something you don't have, your nervous system interprets this situation as a constant threat to survival. It's as if your mind were permanently in emergency mode, releasing stress hormones, keeping muscles tense, preparing the body to fight or flee from a danger that never comes. Because the danger is internal, it's existential. It can't be solved with physical action. That's why you feel that tightness in your chest when you look at your social networks, that sense of urgency that won't let you relax, that restlessness that wakes you up at dawn thinking about everything you need to do, have, be, conquer. Kierkegaard called this the disease of time, the inability to inhabit the present because you're always mentally in the future, always focused on what hasn't happened yet, on what you don't have yet, on what you're not yet. The present becomes just an uncomfortable passage between a past you wish had been different and a future where you'll finally be happy. But the present is the only place where life really happens. It's the only place where you can breathe, feel, connect, find some peace. And when you lose the present, you lose everything. When this entire system of desire pursuit goes into total collapse, something even more dangerous and debilitating is born: modern existential depression. I'm not talking about the natural and temporary sadness we feel when we lose someone dear or go through concrete difficulties. I'm talking about that feeling of absolute emptiness when nothing seems to have flavor, color, or meaning anymore. When you wake up in the morning and can't find a convincing reason to get out of bed. This happens when our mind finally realizes, on a deep and visceral level, that the whole strategy of chasing external pleasures and conquests is a farce, a game that can't be won. It's like an engine that burned out from working beyond its limits for years on end. The person becomes exhausted from desiring, tired of waiting, completely disillusioned with all the promises that were made and never kept. Kierkegaard called this despair that knows itself. When you stop pretending everything is fine and consciously admit that something is fundamentally wrong with the entire structure of your life. The danger is that our culture treats this depression as a purely chemical disease, as a manufacturing defect that should be medicated until it disappears. But often depression is actually a sign of intelligence, an internal system alarm indicating that you're living in a way that violates your deepest nature. It's the soul refusing to continue participating in a game it knows is destructive. And when the normal methods of dealing with anguish stop working, many people turn to extreme solutions: addictions and compulsive behaviors. Alcohol to numb the pain, drugs to escape reality, pornography to simulate intimacy, games to create artificial sensation of conquest, food to fill the emotional void, shopping to generate temporary euphoria. But addictions are just the intensified and desperate version of the same basic problem: the attempt to find satisfaction through external stimuli. It's as if it were common desire, amplified until it becomes an obsession. The person uses the substance or behavior to obtain immediate relief from existential anguish, but when the effect passes, the pain returns more intense than before. So she needs bigger, more frequent, more extreme doses. Addiction isn't lack of willpower or moral failure. It's the logical and predictable consequence of a mind that was conditioned to seek happiness outside itself for years or decades. It's like trying to put out a fire by throwing gasoline on it. The more you try, the more the problem intensifies. And our society not only tolerates certain addictions, but celebrates and encourages them. Work addiction is sold as professional dedication. Shopping addiction is associated with financial success. Exercise addiction is confused with healthy living. Social media addiction is normalized as being connected. We've created a culture where compulsive behaviors are not only accepted, but admired, as long as they're socially productive. All this bombardment of contradictory and incompatible desires ends up generating something terribly modern: the complete fragmentation of personal identity. You wake up in the morning wanting to be a successful professional, but you also want to be a present father or mother. But you also want to be healthy and fit. But you also want to have fun and enjoy life. But you also want to save money for the future. But you also want to travel and have experiences. But you also want to contribute to important social causes. But you also want to have time for hobbies and personal development. Each of these desires is valid individually, but together they pull you in completely opposite directions. It's like being drawn and quartered by wild horses, each one running to a different side. At the end of the day, you can no longer identify who you really are underneath all these personas and expectations. Your decisions become automatic reactions to the most urgent or loudest stimuli. You completely lose track of your center, your non-negotiable values, the things that really define who you are when nobody is looking. You live like a boat adrift in a rough sea, always reacting to waves and storms, never consciously choosing your own direction. Kierkegaard knew that without a coherent and integrated identity, all suffering becomes exponentially more intense, because you don't have a solid foundation, a stable core from which you can face life's inevitable challenges. You become a leaf in the wind, always at the mercy of external forces, never really in control of your own experience. So, if Kierkegaard's diagnosis is correct, if misdirected desire is really the primary source of human suffering, what exactly is the cure? Some spiritual traditions, like certain forms of Buddhism, propose the complete elimination of desire through renunciation and detachment. But Kierkegaard had a radically different and perhaps more realistic approach for Western nature. For him, the problem isn't having desires, it's living as their slave, allowing them to completely dictate the course of your life. The first stage of the cure is brutally simple, but extraordinarily difficult: to admit completely, without reservations or justifications, that you are suffering. Stop pretending on social networks that your life is perfect. Stop blaming external circumstances, other people, bad luck or injustices for your internal malaise. Stop using work, relationships, entertainment, or anything else as anesthesia to avoid feeling the emptiness that exists at the center of your experience. This is infinitely more difficult than it seems, because our entire culture teaches us that admitting suffering is a sign of weakness, personal failure, something to be ashamed of. But Kierkegaard discovered that it's exactly the opposite. Denying suffering and pretending it doesn't exist is what constitutes existential cowardice. When you finally stop spending energy fighting against your own internal experience and accept that anguish, emptiness, restlessness are part of the normal human condition, something magical and liberating happens. You stop fighting against yourself and can start working with the material of your real life. But accepting suffering is just the first step in a much longer and more complex journey. The second movement is learning the crucial difference between orienting and eliminating your desires. Imagine you have a powerful river running through your property. You have two basic options. You can try to dam the river with a dam, completely interrupting its flow. But the water will accumulate, create pressure, and eventually break the dam, causing even more destruction than if you hadn't interfered. Or you can accept the natural force of the river and learn to channel it, directing its energy to irrigate gardens, move mills, generate electricity, transforming a potentially destructive force into a source of life and creativity. Your desires are exactly like that river, a powerful natural energy that can both destroy and create, depending on how you direct it. Instead of desiring immediate and fleeting pleasure, you can learn to desire lasting personal growth. Instead of desiring constant approval from others, you can redirect that energy toward developing solid and independent self-esteem. Instead of desiring to accumulate material possessions, you can channel that same force to contribute meaningfully to something greater than your personal problems. The desire itself continues to exist. In fact, it might even become more intense, but now it serves purposes that really nourish and strengthen your soul instead of draining your vital energy. For Kierkegaard, there's something inside each human being that naturally yearns for the infinite, the transcendent, the sacred, the eternal. This isn't a manufacturing defect that needs to be corrected or eliminated. It's our noblest and most distinctive characteristic as a species. The problem is that our materialistic and secular culture systematically taught us to try to satisfy this legitimate thirst for infinity with things that are inherently finite and temporary. It's like trying to fill a bottomless well by pouring buckets of water. No matter how much you pour, no matter how hard you try, you'll never be able to fill it completely. But when you recognize and honor the fact that you have within yourself a space specifically reserved for the sacred, call it God, transcendent purpose, universal love, cosmic connection, search for truth, you stop trying to fill it with temporary and inadequate substitutes. This spiritual dimension of life doesn't necessarily need to be religious in the traditional or institutional sense. It can be expressed through art, science, the pursuit of social justice, nature protection, education, healing other people. Any activity or commitment that connects you with something greater, more lasting and more meaningful than your immediate personal problems, can serve this transcendent function. The important thing is to recognize that this need exists and deserves to be honored, not denied or ridiculed. Here we arrive at Kierkegaard's deepest and most liberating wisdom, learning to live consciously and even creatively with paradox and contradiction. The truth is that you'll never completely resolve the fundamental tension between your finite nature and your infinite yearnings. You'll continue being a limited being with unlimited dreams until the last day of your life. This contradiction is permanent, it's structural, it's part of what it means to be human. But this tension doesn't need to be only a source of suffering and frustration. It can also be an inexhaustible source of creativity, growth, beauty, and meaning. It's like a musician who deliberately uses the tension between guitar strings to create melodies that touch the soul. The inherent contradiction of the human condition can generate the most beautiful symphonies of existence, the most touching works of art, the deepest acts of love, the most revolutionary scientific discoveries. You learn to dance gracefully with your desires instead of being violently dragged by them. You learn to use your natural restlessness as fuel for projects and relationships that really matter. You learn that true peace doesn't come from getting everything you want, but from consciously wanting only what's really worth having. And paradoxically, when you stop desperately pursuing happiness, it has a much better chance of appearing naturally in your life. Now, the question that remains is deep and personal. Are you trying to find infinity in finite things? Are you expecting objects, people, conquests, or experiences to fill a void that can only be satisfied by something much greater and more transcendent? Kierkegaard showed us that suffering isn't a cosmic error or personal failure. It's a sign that we were made for something far beyond the ordinary and superficial. The next time you feel that familiar anguish, that emptiness that seems to have no name or solution, remember, maybe it's not something to be quickly cured, but something to be deeply understood and consciously transformed. If this video made you rethink your relationship with your own desires and open new possibilities for growth, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Because the journey of true self-knowledge is just beginning, and we have much more to explore together.